In 2010, Kenya joined South Africa in passing regulations to regulate the price of fuel. Well, this became after there was a huge public uproar after fuel prices went through the roof, and the public was blaming fuel marketers. More than 10 years down the line, why has the retail cost of fuel more than doubled? Tonight on the scorecard, we look at the pricing model of fuel in Kenya, and we ask various questions. For example, is EPRA effective in regulating fuel prices in Kenya? Are we using the right model? And what is the way forward? I have always said this, that this is the most intelligent conversation on the land. This is the scorecard. My name is O'Brien Kimani. We are live from Broadcasting House. You're welcome wherever you're watching us from. And time for now to go through the numbers. And Marie Yambo is on standby to get us through this. Marie.
Thank you so much, O'Brien Kimani. And just as O'Brien has said, today is about fuel prices. You know, how does the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority arrives at the fuel prices that we are actually experiencing at the moment? Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. This is the scorecard, and my name is Marie Yambo. And just as you know it, we let the numbers do the talking. So let's break down for you some of the numbers. So currently, the fuel prices, as per the 15th to the 14th of June 2023, these are the fuel prices that the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority has released for to consumers. 182 shillings and 70 cents is what consumers in Nairobi, particularly in Nairobi, are paying for super petrol. Diesel is at 168 shillings and 40 cents. Kerosene at 161 shillings and 13 cents. But then again, how does EPRA arrive at this price of 182 shillings and 70 cents for super petrol for consumers? So let's start at the beginning. Now, what the product cost, that is 101 shillings and 83 cents. That is for super petrol, what we call the landed cost. This is the cost of the product when it lands at the port of Mombasa. It's 101 shillings and 83 cents, 99 shillings and 83 cents for diesel, and kerosene that is at 98 shillings and 4 cents. But now there are other costs to be factored in. That brings us to 182. Let's start with the distribution and storage costs at 3 shillings and 93 cents. What does that even mean? It means that there's pipeline transport cost, that is from Mombasa to Nairobi, at 2 shillings and 53 cents. Margins, that is for profits for wholesalers and retailers, you know. The EPRA has actually put a cap on that at 12 shillings and 39 cents, 12 shillings and 36 cents for diesel, and 12 shillings and 36 cents for kerosene. Now, the margins include that is the wholesalers, is capped at 4 shillings and 20 cents. Dealers, that is retail investment and operating margins, is at 8 shillings and 19 cents. That brings us to 12 shillings and 39 cents for super petrol. Now, taxes and levies is at 64 shillings and 55 cents. That is what even pushes the price even higher. So now let's break it down. This 64 shillings and 55 cents for super petrol, 52.63 for diesel, and 47 shillings and 17 cents for kerosene. Where does that come from? So this is where most of the, monies is gathered from by the government. So we had the excise duty tax at 21 shillings and 95 cents for super petrol, road maintenance levy at 18 shillings. Look at diesel, it's at 11 shillings and 37 cents and 18 shillings again at the road maintenance. Kerosene is at 11 shillings and 37 cents. Definitely there's no road maintenance for kerosene for obvious reasons. Now, we move on, and there's about 9 tax and levies that are actually imposed on the petroleum products when they come into the country. There is also the VAT at 8%, coming to 13 shillings and 53 cents. 12 shillings and 47 cents for diesel, and 11 shillings and 94 cents for kerosene. All that added up brings us to 64 shillings and 55 cents. That is where the chunk of the price of petroleum products in the country comes from. So at the end of the day, these are some of the factors that the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority factors in to come up with the 182 shillings and 70 cents. Now, at the moment, you know, the petroleum products are at 8% VAT, but the finance bill, if passed, is supposed to increase it to 16%. What does that mean? Well, our panel of experts are in studio. They'll be able to break it down for us. But it's not rocket science. Definitely, the commodity markets will go up. That one is given. The transport sector, the manufacturing sector, electricity generation will all have a ripple effect. And definitely that will come to us as consumers. Is there anything that the government can do? You know, are these taxes even relevant, all of them? What is most important? So those are some of the questions that the panel here are going to be discussing and breaking it down for us. So remember, our question of the day is, how has the fuel the hike or increase in fuel prices affected you? So we'd like to hear from you. Get in touch with us on our social media platforms, and we'll be able to sample some of your views within this program. So thank you so much for joining us. O'Brien, it's back to you.
My goodness, that is what we call jaw-dropping numbers. Quite a significant and mouthful there, I must admit. But of course, that's why we are here, so that we can put reason to these numbers. You're watching the scorecard. Marie Yambo has just taken us through the numbers. Time now for me to take you through the list of our guest tonight. We have always presented you with some of the best brains in the land, and of course to help you understand some of these critical and complicated matters. Tonight, we are faced with another panel. Allow me to introduce Engineer Patrick Obath. Engineer Patrick Obath. He's the immediate former chair of the National Oil Corporation of Kenya. He's a past chairperson of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. He's a member of the Muthaiga Golf Club. As you can see, his CV is just on your screen. And he's also the chair of the Kenya Open Golf Tournament. He's an avid golfer. And you know what we say? If you can't play golf, you need to keep on working. Thank you very much indeed, Obath, for joining us tonight. And we look forward to this conversation. You know, of course, we look forward to benefiting from your, tremendous amount of experience in this industry.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Next to Engineer Obath. Look, I mean, your CV is still running, eh? Quite a detailed one, we must agree. Joining us again on this set is Thuo Njoroge. He's an energy economist. We're having all sort of economists. It's just the other day we were having a political economist. Today we have an energy economist. We have land economist. Who else do we have?
No, public sector economists.
Public sector economists. And as you can see, he's also, Thuo is also the Director of Policy and Strategy at the Kenya Austrian Chamber of Commerce. He holds a Master's in Economic, that is Policy and Management, from Makerere University in Uganda. Well, he has been in the private practice for more than 16 years, and he's a columnist, and he's currently undertaking a study on the interconnectivity and market power pool. He's going to tell us something about that. Thank you very much indeed, Thuo, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Very good. And next to Thuo, the man in the middle is Professor Fred Ogola. He's a governance expert as well as an economist. He's a regular face on this show. He's joining us tonight so that he can put power to the numbers that Marie has just taken us through. Do you play golf?
No, but please allow me to say just one word.
Yes.
To my senior here, called Engineer Patrick Obath. He is a career boardroom expert, chair. You see how many things is chaired. So as a strategist, I presented so many strategic plans to him. And after I present a very good strategy, he usually asks me, Fred, where's the sky blue thinking? Where's the new thinking in your strategy? So today, O'Brien, could you ask him, after sharing this National Oil Corporation, where is the sky blue thinking in the oil pricing and the pricing model? I'm sure Mariambo will want to know how sky blue thinking can come to lower these prices. Thank you very much, my senior.
Thank you very much. Very well. We'll definitely delve into the sky blue thinking so that we can also get to understand what thinking goes in that. But thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for honoring our invite and, of course, for gracing our screens tonight. I want to start with Engineer Obath. Should Kenyans be paying 186 shillings for a litre of petrol?
I think that question is one that I think the answer is simply yes.
Yes.
If you look at that price build-up, almost 100 shillings plus is the pure cost of fuel itself. And that really is the big builder, because when you look at the other levies in the fuel, those levies are really fixed costs, apart from the percentage which you got on tax and everything else. But the road maintenance levy and the various levies that you see there are actually fixed. So they actually were looking very big when the basic price of fuel was very low. When the price of fuel was in the 100, 110 shillings per litre, the percentage of tax was over 50%. Right? Now you're at the 180 shillings, the percentage of tax has actually dropped down into the cost of fuel. So the reason we are where we are is because of the global happenings in terms of the cost of fuel. And that is driven by several factors. One is obviously the Ukraine-Russian war, and then the declared maximum price that was put on Russian fuel, and then also the embargoes that people have put on Russia, so that effectively the rest of the world was starved of cheap fuel from Russia, and then the price has gone up. What also has happened in that particular space is that OPEC saw an opportunity. So they've also reduced their production, and that has the same effect of moving the price of fuel up. But that is not the only case. What has happened as well is that the whole logistics world has changed. So the cost of bringing fuel is higher because of the cost of tankers and the cost of fuel, as it were, on a global basis. So if you look at the price of fuel in Kenya and you compare it to other neighboring countries, Kenya is not that bad in terms of the amount that we pay. It is high, yes, but the key thing is that that cost is driven by the global cost of fuel.
I want to hear this from you, even as you attribute this to the what we call global geopolitics. You see, when EPRA came into force, it used to be ERC. It was brought about to try and lower the cost of this commodity. That was in 2010. We had gone through the global financial meltdown, and the prices of the commodity was going through the roof, and the government as well as the public were blaming oil marketers. More than 10 years down the line, you know, the price of this commodity has more than doubled, despite the fact that we have a regulator whose responsibility is to ensure that prices are low. So what is not adding up here?
I think the perception that controlling the price will bring the price down, I think, was the first wrong view. That happened, in fact, when price controls were being brought in and area was being brought in. I was still working in the industry as an employee at the time. And I told the then...
You used to work with Shell?
I used to work for Shell.
Yeah.
And the then PS was telling me, we are going to fix you guys. We are going to control the prices of fuel. I told him...
That was PS Nyoike.
That. Yes, my namesake. I told him, the day you do that, I'll be the happiest CEO in the world. Because the key thing is, when you bring a formula in, it's got to, and this is one of the preconditions we put at that time, it's got to reflect the real cost. So you have, if you look at the formula, it has actually been constructed in such a way that you look at the fuel cost coming in, then you look at the handling costs through the distribution system of the pipeline. There's a cost to that, which was put in as an element in its own right. And then there's a local distribution costs and margins for the oil companies, the ones who are bringing the oil in. And then you have the margins for the transporters and the retailers, right? And that is what brings in your basic commodity price.
Very well.
Right?
Yep.
And so that meant that if that was done right, everybody within the supply chain was properly remunerated for the job that they were doing. And that was set by the government. When all that was done, right, the prices went down, but not because the controls came in, but because at that point in time, because of the recovery from the recession and everything else, the prices actually went down globally. So people thought that the formula of bringing it all in brought the prices down. It just actually explained the prices. And so even if you look at it up to today, the explanation is still exactly the same. And the one variable in all that has been the input price at one end, which is the price of fuel coming into the country.
You know, according to engineer, and he has always been of this stance that price controls were not meant to work in this industry. No. Do you agree with him?
Thank you, Brian, for having me here. I want to differ slightly with my senior, my biggest brother, I can say, in the industry. Because I believe governments are custodians of people's interest. They are there to strike the balance between, for instance, the revenue. If you look at now the different segments and elements that constitute the fuel prices, for instance, the levies, of course, and the VAT, for instance. There is a way I believe we could balance and have to mitigate the population from serious high fuel prices, and at the same time also be able to still be able to get some revenue. And I want to cite a case. If you look at our neighbors, if you look at the East African region, a lot of our member states, you'll be surprised to note that they do not have VAT on petroleum products. Apart from lubricants, for instance, VAT is an item that is, or rather one of the services and commodities that are exempt, VAT exempt. And I'm giving you a case study of Tanzania. I'm giving you a case study of Uganda. Rwanda also is doing the same thing. And the thinking around this government then was like, if you continue to look at this that way, then it will have a ripple effect on the cost of living of the general population. But let's put the context. Let's put.
But even before you proceed, I mean, yes, the three countries that you have mentioned.
Yeah.
Actually, fuel prices are higher than they are in Kenya, despite the fact that they don't have a VAT.
Yes. You look at the other logistical aspects. I mentioned, I gave a specific component, which is of VAT. But again, let me now come back, and again, so that you can be able to understand. In 2010, like you rightly said, EPRA came, the regulator was occasioned in the industry. Then VAT regime sets in at around 2013. And at that time, I remember there were heavy influence from the international, the Bretton Woods institution, particularly the IMF. And government at that time was, the compelling by development partner was subject this component, this commodity, fuel commodity to a value-added tax. But government then, the government of that time, skillfully and carefully navigated this issue by introducing a 4-period transition through which oil and petroleum products that time were not to be subjected to VAT. But soon after the lapse of the window, it was expected that, that the VAT will come back to the petroleum sector. So 2018 comes, government still faces the same challenges that somehow it suspended. And the government was like, okay, then let's meet somewhere, let's meet halfway. We cannot really do 16%, but let's do 8% so that also we take care of the general population. And this is the thinking that I'm talking about, that despite our different independent context, whether you call it Uganda and something, there is something that each government can be able to do, and particularly ours, to be able to mitigate, and see. For me, if you ask me, my view is government is looking at petroleum sector, or rather the petroleum products, as a cash cow, through which revenues can be able to be generated and generated fast.
And the argument is supported by what facts?
Facts in the sense that if you look at, for instance, the pricing model in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, the VAT component is not there on petroleum products.
But fuel is still more expensive.
Yes, fuel is still more expensive. Like I said, mine was.
So then does it beat the purpose?
It does it. So you see, governments on that side will be able to look at to interrogate and see what is composite, what consists of high prices in this region. But of course, VAT is not part of that, which our ecosystem here now in Kenya can be able to I think similarly look into.
Let's imagine for a moment that we don't have VAT on fuel, for example, which is currently at 8%. There are proposals to double this to 16%. And if you were to do quick mathematics, 8% of 186, that would be about 23 shillings. Prof, you're into mathematics.
Yes.
You should guide me here.
Yeah.
So 23 shillings. So it means that fuel will still be retailing at 160 something shillings, right? So is that cheap, really?
It is not cheap. But again, like Patrick did say, there are other factors that do inform the prices of energy.
Very good.
Particularly those in the external market. Yes.
Prof, I know as an economist, you have always frowned at market controls.
Yes.
Was it a wise decision for us to embark on price controls for fuel?
I don't think so, because it has added an additional cost, because there is what he has been told about these levies. EPRA also has to maintain an office. There's a board for it. There's management for it. So you are creating a body to control prices by bringing them down, and also they want to eat part of it. So there's levies that go to EPRA, and therefore that's add additional cost to the fuel. So if you remove the EPRA from the equation look much better, and then the equal sign on the other side will look much better. So according to me, we have always thought of trying to solve a problem. In fact, for me, I'm sorry if I go biblical, that whenever human beings trying to solve a problem, they create another problem. So whenever you create commissions, for example, we had corruption in Kenya, we create another commission to look at it. That commission has to be given around 16 billion shillings to run. Yet they are not fighting corruption. You come to EPRA, the same thing. It was created to lower the cost of fuel. Yet they also have to consume part of that fuel prices, which drives it up. So I'm thinking, are we shooting ourselves on the foot by creating every time there's a commission, this commission, that authority, this authority, that? Are these authorities helping us to have a more expensive life, or they're making life bearable? The other thing that also is important here to illustrate is that the government could also be creating an issue which actually must be seen. You've heard about the issue of adulterated fuel. When the margins for the marketers is very thin, and the government takes nearly 64%, contributes 64% to the cost of fuel, then that means that sometimes you find some marketers trying to have bad fuel selling to people because they don't want to lose money. You can add some liquid there, which is not very nice. I'm sure when you had Shell, these are fears where Shell, petrol station like Shell and Total came clearly by saying they cannot be able to sell adulterated fuel. So nowadays, when you hear when fuel prices are going up, you are worried where can you fuel your car in some petrol station in Kisumu that has no name? Would you be able to risk your car with the fuel stations that you look at where they are storing fuel? You wonder whether this fuel is clear. So I'm trying to say that it has created so many issues. And remember, storage is charged, is put there. Because storage is charged, will you have a quality storage that can keep the fuel well, or you'll try to have a very cheap storage so that your margin on storage goes up? You see, also there's thing Mariambo was able to tell you, there are so many things inside those numbers. Like, for example, evaporation. Evaporation is also eating into this. How can we be able to reduce evaporation so that those coins that goes to evaporation can go into reducing our cost of fuel? So if you look at the entire calculation of economics, I was looking at the equation, I believe there are some things which are not there. And that's why I'm trying to say that there are so many innovative ways. And by the way, let me also put this clearly, that according to me, we are trying also to address a wrong problem as a country. When we are taxing ourselves until we cannot grow our economy, until creating jobs become harder, until Kenyans can have more income, then we cannot be able to overcome this thing of fuel prices. Because I can tell you, Obran, we've discussed this with you every day. Cost of living will never go down. It will only go up. What needs to go up in equal measure is income. Is income. Yeah. And if we can't create jobs, we cannot make economy more productive by making people who do producers have expensive life, employers make it too much expensive for employers to create jobs, in making it difficult for Kenyans to earn more income. We are not solving the issue. For me, the country is addressing the wrong problem. We should have an income problem. Are you trying to say that Unga will never be below 100? No, I can tell you, Obran, when I was born, how much was Unga? I bought bread at 5 shillings. I think my senior here must have bought it for 2 shillings or less. Yep. When now we are buying bread at 150, do you want to tell me, if you are the one who sells bread, do you want to tell me bread should be brought to 5 shillings? When I hear the government promising people that Unga will go back to 70 shillings, now look at the wholesalers, the retailers, the transporters, the input providers. Are you telling them we're going to cut their margins so that it's cheaper? What we need to tell Kenyans is that we have to come with a formula for affordability. Very good. And I like the fact that you're bringing in the issue of affordability. And this is where now I want to bring in the issues of, levies and taxes. When you look at, there are about 10 levies and taxes that go into fuel. One of them, and I'm going to name them, there is excise duty. There is road maintenance levy. There is petroleum development levy. There is petroleum regulatory levy, railway development levy, anti-adulteration levy, merchant shipping levy, import declaration fee, value added tax. All these, if you put them together, for every 1 liter of fuel, they take about 64.5 shillings. Why is fuel so taxed?
The oil companies are the world's best tax collectors. That's a simple thing. I mean, the government is lazy, right? Instead of finding other ways of getting tax, so long as somebody takes a liter of fuel, right, its tax has already been paid. Very efficient. right? So if you want an efficient tax collector, it's your fuel system. And
this is the world over?
No, it's here.
It's just here in Kenya?
Where you've got all these levies are put in, right? There should be certain taxes that are put to the fuel. That is correct, yeah? But adding all these other levies, which should be collected elsewhere, onto fuel, that is where the problem comes. Road maintenance levy, where did it come from? The road maintenance levy came from trying to find a simpler way of doing the road tax. Every car used to have a tax sticker that you had to renew every year, right? But then people were sort of escaping from it, and what have you?
Even bicycles.
Yeah, and even
bicycles?
Yes.
Every vehicle had a road tax.
Bicycles?
Yes, bicycles, yes.
Used to be there.
My father got arrested one day for not having a license, road license for a bicycle.
Are you kidding me?
Yes,
So
it's true.
what happened was that effectively, that was converted into the road maintenance levy, right? And that
so
was
they
a
did
tax
away with
that
the
used
stickers.
to be done somewhere else, was brought in there, right? Railway levy. Why do you bring it into fuel?
Do not cuss.
Why bring it into fuel, right? Because the railway should be charged on cargo, which uses the railway, not on fuel. So you look at all these taxes that have been put on fuel, it's completely unfair, because that actually should be taxed in a different place, with a different authority. The only tax that should be there is the one for the regulator. But again, if the volume increases, does that mean the regulator's work increases? It doesn't.
No, it does not.
It doesn't. So the regulator is doing a certain amount of work, but because the volume goes up, there's a lot more money going to the regulator, but he's not doing that much more work. So that should actually be a fixed price that is actually calculated on a regular basis and then dispensed through the fuel system. Or once you reach a certain point, right, you can average it out.
Let me ask you this, engineer. Of all these 10 taxes and levies, which one should remain?
It's the normal ones. You should have excise. VAT.
So excise here is about
regulator.
Excise is about 21 shillings and 95 cents.
Right.
Which other one?
VAT.
VAT at 8%, that comes to about 13 shillings.
And then the regulator's fee. That's it.
And then the regulator's fee. Just those three.
Those three are the only ones that should stay there, but also not in the quantities.
Not in the quantities.
Go down, right? The regulator should actually be an amount, right? In fact, it should even be removed. It should be, I mean, I'll take full responsibility for it being there, because when the original Petroleum Act was designed, the levy was put in so that the regulator had a funding that was not going to be allocated.
It doesn't require exchequer funding.
Exactly, and that's why it was put in there, right? So that they were able to operate and look and control us as an industry. So when that thing was drafted, we actually said put it there instead, right?
Yes. Just to add something here, there are two things I would like to add. Remember, there are some taxes which are doubled. For example, the railway levy is also charged when you import a car. Actually, sometimes even road levy is also put on other products which are non-petroleum products. The other thing to discover is the government thinks that the more they tax as the ball rolls, the more money they make. So even the fuel, there is the wholesale taxes you pay, but also you pay them at the retail level. In fact, this has also made that thing slightly inefficient, and actually we are proposing to the committee on the finance bill on how can you just raise these things and collect them at the wholesale level rather than having it here. For example, let me tell you, Brian, the retailers are around 3,000 in Kenya. So KRA is taxing at the wholesale level, then also trying to tax at the retail level, and the retail level, the efficiency of collecting taxes from 3,000 people is too much. So we're proposing, why don't you just put these taxes...
You're talking about 3,000. What is 3,000?
3,000 people who sell oil, for example, the petrol stations.
Petrol stations.
So if there are
3,000 petrol outlets.
In Kenya,
gas stations.
Yes. So if you are waiting to tax at the retail level, the team, the office, and the infrastructure and resources you have to put to relate with 3,000 people. Oh, Brian, can you imagine that your phone has 3,000 people that you have to talk to nearly on a daily basis, if not on a weekly basis? It's overwhelming. So we are asking, why don't you be more efficient by taxing only at the wholesale level and push this retail level to be taxed at the level? For example, Safaricom pays taxes at the wholesale level for all the distributors underneath it. So then these people down here don't have to relate with carry. But we are talking about even the efficiency that can be saved from taxing at the wholesale level. Then maybe you can pass a shilling to the retailers, to the customer, just to enjoy 1 shilling per fuel. I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, yes.
I think there's one other thing that that concerns me with the way the country is going now by thinking of adding more tax. To the fuel. Consider what a retail outlet now looks like compared to 15 years ago. A retail outlet is now what is called, is more like a strip mall. You have a whole series of shops that are there in a retail outlet. Now, those are investments that are done by the oil companies, and then people come in and they work on the street mall, on the strip mall. Now, how much employment is created by the fact that the owner of the retail station, the oil company, or even the retailer themselves, whoever, depending on the model that is done there, is able to invest in all this because of what they're getting out of the liter of fuel. Because the more they get, right, they're able to invest, and the investment model will improve. So it means that every single retail outlet that is put up now is generating how many more jobs? How much more money is it putting in the economy in terms of that?
Yeah.
So rather than try and stifle and say we can get more money out of this place, there needs to be the realization that if the margins are kept reasonable, not excessive, and that can be discussed what's reasonable. If they're kept reasonable, then the oil companies are able to invest a lot more in creating these centers, the strip malls, that are able to generate jobs.
You see, we are talking about a commodity here that has a significant say on the cost of living, not just here in Kenya, but around the world. And we have also seen this in Europe when the war between Russia and Ukraine escalated, and gas prices went through the roof in Europe. There was social upheaval in some countries. We also saw the same in the United States. Actually, it took the government to intervene and say fuel prices cannot go beyond this point. And America had to release so much oil from their storage to force down the prices of oil. And so we are talking about a very and highly critical product here. But I just want to hear from you, Thuo. Are we better off without price controls? Are we better off without the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority?
To some extent, I want to anchor my argument still, like Doc did put it. The issue about excessive pricing on each of the so for instance now the EPRA, the regulator, you know, and what is it that they are taking. Ombath did just explain very well, and he said given the big numbers, the volumes that are coming with the marketeers, it is obvious that the regulator can enjoy from that economics of scale. And that essentially means they can come down. So I think the onus is on policymakers and those who now sit at the decision-making table to be able to advise and see what then is ideal for EPRA, or rather for the regulatory body, to capture, and how we go about that.
Before we take a short break, I also want to hear from you. I mean, when you look at these prices, they are somehow very discriminatory because the people in Mombasa, they pay the lowest. The people in Mandera, I think they pay the highest. And the people in Mandera, the Mandera County is one of the poorest. It's among the top 5 poorest counties in this country. But that is where the people are paying more for fuel. So is it high time we relooked into our pricing model, Prof, and really come up with a modern way of pricing fuel in this country?
Obran, I think this is very unfortunate, because the farther you are from the pump, the more disadvantaged you are. And some of these development centers are man-made. Remember that the inequality is man-made. God never created anybody unequal. And if you look, for example, why is Nairobi as good as it is compared, for example, to Mandera? Because the Western education, first of all, settled in Kabete, and people access education. Now, somebody who got education latest gets oil latest. They get news. I'm sure. I'm happy now that KBC maybe can be heard from Mandera. Let me confirm.
It is not maybe. It can.
It can, isn't it? Before, these guys used to read newspapers 1 week later. There was no mobile phone. They received mobile phone latest. Can you imagine? You saw the Bible latest. You receive news latest. You receive Western education latest. You receive fuel last, and your fuel is more expensive. Then secondly, I tell you, anything that moves go up when fuel goes up, except the mountain. You can hike the mountain for free because mountains don't move. But if anything, food, for example, oil, cooking oil, I've heard the president saying he will lower the cost of LPG gas as fuel goes up. This is not possible logically, because those LPG gases have to be transported, and transportation will be factored in it. So somebody in Mandera who needs to get LPG gases transported, for example, from Mombasa, where they're being manufactured, will pay more for LPG gas because of the distance. So distance from Nairobi is your trouble. Even if you look at even the cost of land, the nearer you are to Nairobi, the more value. Of course, they can gain from the fact that rent in Mandera is lower. Maybe God has given this to them. But there are some other things they suffer. But the main driver of cost is energy. In fact, as an energy economist, in fact, you realize that the energy contributes a lot to cost of production, cost of logistics, distribution, everything. Even the cost of lighting is very high. The only thing is that, are there alternative means? And that's why I want to highlight the fact that maybe engineer here can confirm that apart from the variables he talks about that creates the issue of the commodity prices on oil, also some countries have made deliberate choices to move from fossil fuels to alternative fuels. And because of resources scarcity, they cannot give you fossil fuels at the same rate as they build alternative green energy. So because of the fact that they've cut development on fossil fuels, supply-demand forces, like for example Norway, makes it possible that now fuel prices will go up because Norway is clear. They're moving into alternative energy. So that's also there, and that's also affecting the prices.
But also it's good to point out that you know, we don't have any country in the world that has migrated 100%, you know, to alternative energy.
No, but the issue of production, they have...
And the country that you're talking about, Norway, is one of the biggest producers of oil and gas.
And they are saying they are now slowing down on producing fossil fuel, and they are now putting infrastructure for alternative energy. And because of that, they are not producing as more as they used to do, and because of supply-demand prices, it's affecting you where you're sitting here.
Let me just
quickly before we take
let me just shed some light on this issue of the price of fuel in Mandera. Before the price control formula was put in, as an oil marketer, we used to do what we used to have cross subsidies, right? The volumes in Nairobi are extremely high, and people in Nairobi can afford to pay more for fuel because of the structure of the economy. So what we used to do was to actually increase a little bit the cost in Nairobi, which would then subsidize the price going to Mandera. So prior to price control, the price of fuel in Mandera was the differential was much smaller, because we were subsidizing the fuel to remote places as a result of that. So cross subsidies were put in. In other countries like Madagascar, for example, that is exactly what they do. They have price control formula, make sure that the price of fuel is almost equal across the whole country, right? So, and that way you look at your large consumption centers and you base your national fuel price on the price in that center, right? And it means that if you increase that a bit, it can actually subsidize everything else. So it comes out at the same price. These are some of the things now that perhaps the government can look at in terms of trying to reduce the cost of doing business in those parts of the country so that they can begin to grow themselves from that point of view. And these are very simple things to do, right, in terms of just tweaking that formula so that, you know, the price of fuel in Lodwar, in Garissa, whatever it is, and so forth, is not exorbitant purely because of distance.
Very good. I mean, you know, we'll be coming back and asking, we want to ask ourselves, I mean, 10 years, you know, it's quite a long time and so much water has passed under the bridge. Is it high time that we sat down and we relooked at our fuel pricing models and now base it on the new realities that have emerged? Gentlemen, thank you very much. And of course, we are coming to you live from Broadcasting House. You're watching this scorecard. We're live from Broadcasting House. I want now to put to you the question of the day. Let's see the question of the day. My producer, if you can put the poll there, you have it. The question of the day is, how has the increase in fuel prices affected you? And the reality of life is, all of us, we have been affected by the increase in fuel prices. So the question is, how? Well, we have given you our socials. We are taking a short break and we are back. You're watching the scorecard. Stay right here.
Odds in the world every day on selected matches. Make a decision. Mozart Bet.
Manake mimi askari wako walipa shingapi?
I'm not going, I'm here to stay.
You leave this house.
Hauna shughuli zingine za kufanya?
I am a man of few words.
Kisha nikome.
Beno.
Mimi.
Yes, you go.
Na mke mwingine maika naye huyu. Nenda polisi lakini.
Unakilo kichana.
Heshima unipi maika.
Pafu sana.
And now there are just 2 teams left. The cup holders take on Eintracht Frankfurt.
What's the header? Danny Olmo.
The Red Bulls.
And DK.
Against the Eagles. It's all or nothing time.
It's Soboslai again.
Kick-off on June 3rd.
Kamada.
There can only be one winner.
Colomwani. What a night for RB Leipzig.
Leipzig-Frankfurt, the DFB Cup final.
Wewe ana shoplift, that is wrong.
Nimeweka tishu kwa njekeke, si ndio? Kwa njekeke.
Keke ni nini?
Njekeke ni nini mheshimiwa?
Si nimekwambia ulitumie lugha ya taifa ile tutaelewa.
Mimi koona kwa CCTV nini ikoweka hapo Dani, hapa Dani.
Najua kiini.
Wewe unajua
mheshimiwa.
Ongea.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste na bali Crystal Play Council.
Are baba yeye iko sema nini? Mimi hapa najua hiyo
Ni watu wawili mnaishi aje ndani?
Tunaishi tu ndani ya nyumba.
Romantically.
tunakuwa
hapa mnagombana tu saa yote kwanza mwingie hapa mnagombana.
Ni vile tuko mbele ya watu.
Ndio mnagombanaga mbele ya watu. Na sasa hawa watoto wote unawaleta duniani kuwapatisha tabu ya nini?
Nani alisema yuko na sahani yao?
It is one of the oldest competitions in football history, the DFB Pokal. Catch all the high-tempo fun, the cheers and tears as football made in Germany comes to you live on KBC Channel 1.
Gorgeous little flick from Mario Götze. Let's in Colomani to score his fourth in the competition this season. Way better than any blockbuster.
Don't miss the grand finale on the 3rd of June 2023. KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Welcome back. You're watching the Scorecard live from Broadcasting House. A very interesting conversation we are having here on the pricing, the fuel pricing model in Kenya. Whether it has been effective or it is high time that we sat down and, of course, we looked into this issue. Well, we are in the company of our experts tonight. Marie Yambo is on the scoreboard. She's about to sample some of your feelings and some of your views. Marie Yambo, what are our people saying?
Quite a lot of reactions on our social media platforms. And just like our panel of analysts have been saying, some of these levies and taxes probably need to be relooked into. And so we look at our Facebook page where Eugene Owor is saying, I used to go for work using 20 bob, nowadays I use 50 bob. Definitely, as we've said, the price of, the increase in price of fuel will affect very many sectors, you know, transport, manufacturing, and all that. So he's saying he used to use 20 bob, now he's using 50 bob. Frederick Epelatz, who hails from Amagoro in Teso North, that is Busia County, says he lives about approximately 5 kilometers from the Malabo border, and traveling there used to be cheap, where I used to pay 30 shillings using public means and 50 shillings. I think this is Okada, must be, that must be border, you know, 50 shillings. Today it has risen from 60 and 100 respectively. So sincerely, he's saying Kenyans are suffering. Earth is hard and Kenya is even harder. That's what he's saying. Okwiri Shadrach say it has affected me at large because there's no difference between owning your own car and using a public transport system, you know. If I may quote him, that is saying, Hadi, sahi huwa nachelewa job ili nitembe kiasi. I think he's saying he first of all goes a distance by foot, then again, you know, for him to pay cheaper, you know. So Kenyans just have to, you know, they say live within your means. So this is what he's saying he's trying to do it. Life, okay, from Teso, he's also from Teso. Moses Mauga, I used to pay 400 shillings, now I'm paying 750 shillings, and that is without bargaining. Yeah, so those are some of the, reactions we have from Kenyans, but we'll be sampling more. Pahali nalipaga 30 bob, sahi tunalipa 60, nikubaya. You know, that is from Chiku Chikaya on Facebook. So, O'Brien, you can see that Kenyans are really suffering indeed.
Also seeing another comment there from Sanjay Peters, anasema squeezy,
yeah.
Unabishana na makanga hadi mnapigania juu ya 20 bob.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. You know, so keep the comments coming on our Facebook and Twitter. You know, the question of the day was, has the increase in the fuel prices affected you? So tell us how it has affected you. So yes, we continue the discussions.
Very good indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Marie, for bringing us some of the sentiments that Kenyans are sharing here. And of course, we continue with our with our analysis here, and of course our input. I wanted to pose this question to Prof. I mean, 10 years since the petroleum pricing regulations came into force. Is it high time then we sat down, re-looked at those regulations and asked ourselves, are they serving the intended purpose, honestly?
I think that's what I was just trying to think about it, that we always try to solve a problem and then we create a solution that brings another problem, and then we start solving another problem on top of that problem without looking at what were we trying to solve in the first case. So if EPRA was supposed, which was ERC before, was supposed to lower the cost of fuel. Have they achieved it? And I think the scorecard will be judging them on that basis. To the extent that they have been able to do that, they should stay. Why should we continue perpetuating this? Because that's where the main thing hurts. Because as far as I'm concerned, and I think Engineer Patrick Obath here agrees, that we need to review this formula and this model. Because there are some things there which I've just put, but we are not looking at the fact that it is helping, because it has added a cost, and that cost, we are trying to swallow it, and we have ignored that that very cost was supposed to help us lower something. For example, you can invest in something to lower your cost. That's why people go buy a mortgage, because they know that in the end, they're going to buy this house at a cheaper price earlier than buying it later. But if you find out that the outcome of taking this journey is going to be more costly, why are we doing it? But of course, some people can argue maybe you're creating jobs for the people in the EPRA. Is that fair enough to bring this cost to all Kenyans and to make all Kenyans suffer? I think that there must be a relook at this thing, asking the question, why, how, and then what can be done. And I think this will be a high stakeholder model. But what I can tell EPRA is that I've talked to retailers. They know the solution, because they see revenue leakages even if this model is being used. How can you be able to seal those loopholes using the very players in the industry and having candid conversations with them? And of course, what I want to advise Kenyans also, in fact of them crying like the Miriambo has just read these things, there are also wastages that we do for ourselves. For example, you can see in the house, you can find 4 bulbs on. Why should you have your 4 bulbs on? I've also seen cases whereby some people have unnecessary travels. Do you know that people do unnecessary travels? People just react emotionally. For example, during even political rallies, motorcycles are very busy to go and see this politician, that politician. I'm just trying to say that also we need to cut our own costs, because, Brian, you pay for your behaviors.
So you're advising people on austerity measures?
Of course now, because if you see another one of friend of mine saying he walks, then after that he takes the motorcycle. We pay for our behavior. If you give me your M-Pesa statement, I'll tell you your behavior. And if you find yourself spending more money on movements, you have to ask yourself whether this movement brings income.
Very good.
And if they can't bring income, then you have to cut them down.
I want to hear this from Engineer Obath. You know, I have seen a situation whereby some gas stations or some brands in the Kenyan markets, they price their fuel 5 shillings lower than the maximum recommended prices, which means that we can still tinker with the prices and bring them down. Or what is the whole pricing model? What kind of pricing model do they use, honestly?
You know, it's Murphy's Law. EPRA sets the maximum price. Nobody tells you got to go lower. So everybody prices at the maximum price. I'm looking for margin. So that's what I'll do. I'll price it at that maximum. And I make the maximum I can, because that's what I can do. If I believe that by pricing lower in certain locations, I can increase my volume, I'm willing to give away a bit of margin, right? And my total income will increase because of the volumes I'm getting from the same place. Because if I've got a petrol station and I increase my throughput by dropping it by 2 shillings, I increase my throughput by 30%, I'm getting a lot more money out of that place.
But
So-
look, when you look at
so
even
the
at the
oil-
margins set by EPRA, it is 12 shillings for a litre.
Yes.
Isn't it also high time that we also really looked into these margins for marketers really and ask ourselves, should they be making 12 shillings for every litre? Can they, for example, make 8 shillings, 7 shillings?
That
Can you
is-
still survive in this business?
I think I was going to say that there are several things that need to happen in the model that we currently have, right? The first thing is that EPRA has taken on a whole bunch of responsibilities that it never had when it started off. And the price of fuel is funding all those extra activities that should be funded by somebody else. Take those away, remove them, so that the cost of EPRA goes down, right? A lot of they earn money from electricity and from petroleum, right? So they're not just price control mechanism, they've got a whole host of regulatory activities that have nothing to do with price. And that is creep that has come in over the years. And regulations have been put in to add more work to EPRA. So now you're funding EPRA from fuel for doing things that have nothing to do with fuel directly. So that needs to be looked at and stripped out and put somewhere else, and they earn their money to do that somewhere else.
I want to hear this from you,
So-
because I know you have been in this market for many years. Is it high time also we looked into the margins of oil marketers and probably work with a lower figure? Let's say we shave off 5 shillings.
I'm coming to that. What needs to be done, and I think you'll probably be shocked if you do it, you need to look at the elements that go into the margin, right? Because the margin was actually calculated on a real model of an operating petrol station, an operating transporter, and an operating marketing organization with its distribution network. And when the first costings were done, it was an open book. It was an open book. So the retailer said, these are my costs, these are my whatever it is, and that's how much profit I'm making. And therefore the margin was sized to take care of that. It was actually a very carefully thought through process to get all that. So if you actually go and begin to look at the build-up that comes to that margin, it's not just a question of slashing the margin away, because you can do that and then you close all your retail stations because they can't afford to operate. They've got to be a realistic look at the changing technology, right? These days you've got digital ways of working. The pumps have become different, whatever it is, and so forth. Can we change the way retail stations operate? Can we do away with attendance and go the way Europe is? And people now will have to come and fill their own vehicles, me and you, and go and pay. Those are some of the discussions that we can now have as a nation, because what will happen is if you do that, then the prices can come down because the pump attendants are out. You've kicked them out, and it means that I will myself will now fill, and then I'll pay with my card and do whatever. But you are taking how many people out of work by doing the same thing? So I think the question you've asked is a right one, but I think the answer you'll get is very different from what you expect.
Let me also hear from Prof. I mean, look, in the last 10 years, the number of gas stations in this country has more than tripled.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay? You drive around Nairobi, and for every stretch of about 10 kilometers, you have 3 or more, gas stations, which is a sign that it is a lucrative business.
They're breaking even.
So
it is not lucrative, and I want to correct that. You find that the modern retail outlet is not just a petrol station. And that's the key thing. That's the difference that has happened. Before, it was just a retail outlet where you come in and you fuel. But what has changed?
But you also want to tell us that it is not lucrative.
So let me just put here. I've done a strategy for the first station on Kangundo Road called Shell. I was in charge of looking for how that model can work. I even came with a marketing strategy for it. And I can tell you, very few fuel make reasonable profit relying only on fuel. In fact, when you have a tire center, you have these shops like all strip shops.
Strip mall, yeah.
This is where actually money is selling those lubricants, name it, all those things. Money comes from the other. In fact, the core, the fuel is just to bring the ecosystem, but the money is made on the other businesses. And on your point also, when you're asking him about the issue of the margins for the retailers, where there's some people lower by 5 shillings, it's also a cash flow issue. You know, if you sell quickly, then you have cash flow. And because cash is king, some of them go for cash flow because sometimes you can be profitable in a business where there's no cash. So you get stuck. How can you do your next order? So that also is factored in the whole scenario. But also something very important, if I want to highlight what my senior was talking about, the issue of the oil prices in the region. On the VAT, on lubricant and the rest, have made Kenyans to go and service planes in Uganda, which means that this high taxation is not only killing the people in terms of cost of living, but also killing businesses. Because if you go to service a plane in Uganda, in Entebbe, instead of doing them here in Wilson, the planes parked in Wilson here are being serviced in another country, and it's cheaper to fly a plane to another country, service and bring it back. It shows there's an issue. So, Obran, there are so many issues in this fuel pricing model that in fact you cannot even go to the depth of it. And for me, what I would urge the EPRA, could you please bring more hard-nosed economists to really model these things rather than hearsay? In fact, as my senior here said, where you are telling people these are my costs, you know, we don't want to know your cost. We should go back to market economy where supply and demand forces work. But what the problem is that you just put certain things which should be done to allow the fuel prices to drive. In fact, for me, you go to, we discussed the other day about energy, even if you go to the issue of Kenya Power and the rest, without competition, normally people feel very comfortable. In fact, you had, my senior here said, when he was a CEO, he was praying the regulation come in to regulate prices, he will be happy as a CEO. And I'm sure that oil companies are very happy because they just say, these are my costs, so I run this way. I'm sure that we are giving a lot of leeway to predatory economy. For example, you had there somebody says the fuel prices has caused the moving fare from 30 to 100. Do you think they have gone up by 300%? No. In matatu industry, if you had fuel by 2 shillings, they double the prices. They don't go at the equal amount, which means that we are putting more pressure on Kenyans. And I can tell you now, moving from Rongai to Nairobi, which peak hours is 150, will go to 150 if we add that fuel levy. From Githurai, is it Githurai? It's called 46 or 56? 45.
Yes.
That also will move from 100 to 150. If you go to Kawangware 56, that also will go up from 100 shillings to 150. They don't reason by saying, let's calculate it. For them, they are not EPRA to calculate to the last mile. They just say, oh, fuel has gone up, let's double. It is raining, let's double. So I'm sure this is how Kenyans are going to suffer. And I would like the president who says that he would like to equate the equation in the country. The president actually is sky blue thinking, but sky blue thinking won't help if we don't find a formula to put it on the ground and execute it.
You see, I can see time is really well spent. It's almost coming to, you know, 11:15, and we have to wind up. But not before we go through our ritual of scorecarding, and this is one of the most unique concepts about this show. And the first question that I want to pose to the 3 gentlemen here is, let's put the question on the screen. Is EPRA a public-centric institution? That is the first question. And who wants to go first? How do you rate that? Obath, is EPRA a public-centric institution?
The word R in the name means it cannot be. Right? If it had C, customer, it would be.
Yes.
So for me, it is not.
It is not.
It's a regulator, and therefore it is not public-centric.
Yes.
So from 0 to 5, how would you rate it?
I'd give it a cool 3.
3?
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite generous, eh? What about Prof?
As far as I'm concerned, I think EPRA has just come to create a share of the pie for itself, and for that matter, I would give it a 1. I think we were better off without EPRA. EPRA has not added additional value to our pockets and to the pump prices.
So you're giving it 1?
A 1.
Thuo?
I'll give them 2.
2.
EPRA is not a public-centric institution. It does not resonate with the industry, particularly the end users in the industry, who are me and you, who benefit from. So what we are seeing is that on the reverse is that the increased costs are the ones that we are having. So to that extent, then, I think there is more that needs to be done from these institutions, and Patrick did put this clearly. The more you engage a holistic stakeholder engagement, then the better it is going to be for the institution.
Very good. So for Patrick Obath, engineer, you are assigning it 3. For Prof, you are quite mean. You're talking about 1. And for Thuo, you're talking about 2. Very good. Let's now go to the other question. How do you rate the effectiveness of EPRA in regulating fuel prices? Who wants to go first?
I think I'll go first, now that it began from the other end. I'll give them 1.
You give them 1? Okay.
I'll give them 1. Because of the regulation. You just read, Marie just read a lot of whole list of components that compensate different charges that EPRA has put in place. I believe these ones can be revised and have a more realistic. Patrick Obath did mention something very interesting. There is the whole issue about the market imperative. How realistic is this to the market? And then find out what is it that is what is the component, which of the component is really supposed to be, supposed to be really reflect the market.
So you're giving it 1?
So I give them 1, yes.
You're giving them 1. Very good. Prof?
From the word effective means making the right decision. Kenyans have been making noise about high cost of living. Then they just increased it. And they are proposing to increase it higher. Effective means making the right decision.
They are not proposing to.
Yeah, of course.
It is the government that is proposing to increase
So then, that's my point. My point is, if you are not independent and you don't make your decisions independently, then even how can we rate you to be effective? The decision for the price is not yours, so you are just an agent being told to do what you need to do. So how effective are you if you are being told what to do? Even on this show, Obran, as our host, I'm sure your boss just says, do the show, ensure people enjoy. But they have not told you when to call Fred, when to call Thuo, and when to call Engineer Obath. He is leaving you a free hand to how to make the show good. And the fact that EPRA, you're saying, is being told on what to do, almost likely there are so many determinants which are outside their control.
Yeah.
Then is it their decision to make the fuel prices to be what it is? Then I give them 1.
You're giving them 1. Did you copy from him?
No, I have different reasons. He has different reasons.
Okay.
My 1 is not his 1.
Yes. Your 1 is different from him. The reasons actually.
Yes.
The 1 is the same.
Yes.
But the reasons are different.
Different, very different.
What about Patrick?
When you look at the word regulating, it means you have been given a formula and you implement it. And that is all they do, and nothing else. They don't think about the fuel price. All they do is work with what they've been given. And I think EPRA has to change its mind. And this is now the blue sky thinking that you're coming to. They have to completely flip and look at regulation by thinking rather than by law. And if they think of regulation by thinking, they should be looking at the environment, they should be looking at mechanization and whatever it is and so forth, and they should be coming up with a formula that says, fine, we will give you so much for you to mechanize and improve your service and everything else so that you lower your cost, after which the prices come down, right? So in terms of why EPRA was put up in the first place was because Kenyans were raising hell about the price of fuel. And they are not being proactive. They are not thinking about that thing that was pinching Kenyans, which is why EPRA was formed in the first place, and the whole issue of pricing was removed from the oil marketers who used to do their, it was a question of supply and demand and whatever it is and so forth. All that was what controlled the price. And so they are not responding to the public.
So
and therefore, I'd give them a 1.
And just to add on that, if there's a formula they are using, do we need them? Why don't we use a robot to just calculate the formula and they should not be there?
So the three of you...
That is why we talked about all these additional things they're doing.
So 1-1, but for different reasons.
Yes. No, the class is making noise. Yes. And I'll crack the whip. Okay. So the three of you, you're in agreement that in terms of rating the effectiveness of EPRA in regulating fuel prices, all of you are in agreement that you're giving it 1-1-1.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm giving you 10 seconds to say your final remarks. What is the way forward? How do we make the situation better? Because this show is not about whining. It's also about providing solutions. And I'll start with Prof.
A way forward is to bring all stakeholders together in a consultative forum, and I think there's a voice which is missing, which is the voice of the customer, who is suffering most, who represents them in this whole scenario. Until the customer is happy and oil marketing companies say customer is king, when will customer become king in the formula for regulating oil? Before that, everything will be expensive because, as we said, EPRA is insensitive to the client, the person who pays even the levies that keeps them in office.
Your 10 seconds are over. Yes, Thuo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the strategic imperative of the entire energy sector, which is to provide affordable, cost-effective, sustainable and available energy for all, for Kenyans. Whether you look at that from the petroleum angle or whether you look at that from the angle of electricity. In any endeavor that we do, in any step, in any milestone that we make, lest the onus be on us to ask ourselves, are we still observing the very strategic imperative that was meant for the energy sector in this country?
Very good. Obath.
I think I'll go by what I was challenged with at the beginning. We need to do some blue sky thinking and look at energy, petroleum, and look at the nexus of all those, so that we get the most cost-effective way for people to live, whether it is a supply of electricity, whether it is a supply of mobility, right? Because fuel does something.
Yes.
There's the supply of energy, there's the supply of mobility, and so forth and so on. We need to look at all those elements and look at how we can begin to go to a cost-effective solution to provide what the public wants. Let's not look at the price of fuel. Let's look at what fuel does and see how we can make it cheaper. And it could be fuel, it could be other forms of energy, it could be getting cycling tracks so people buy bicycles and go around. Let's be thinking differently about the issue of mobility and all those things.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us and of course for sharing your insight with us. But before we wrap it up, we want to go to Marie Yambo. She's still going through the responses. Marie Yambo, what do you want to tell us now?
O'Brien, you know, looking at the social media platform, especially on our Facebook, You know, just as the panelists are in agreement that a lot needs to be done in as far as, you know, EPRA, its mandate, whether it's public-centric or consumer-centric for that matter, it's the same thing that we're seeing on our social media platform. And Elvins Wamanga is saying, in many ways, that the question that we were asking today, and that was, how has the increase in fuel prices affected you? And so Elvins Wamanga is saying, in many ways that I cannot tell by now, I have lost hope. That is him, or we have lost hope for that matter. Marco Mole is saying spending more on less products and services. Remember, when fuel go up, commodities also go up. So you're paying more for less products. That is according to Mark Omolo. Eugene Owori is saying, I can't transport my goods to the market. Again, you know, that is the issue of transport, you know. And finally, we have Moses Maoga, who's, I can't do my daily duties because of double fare. So, at the end of the day, the ball is in the court of EPRA. What can be done? The finance bill is coming up. What can our parliamentarians do? So, that is something that needs to be addressed so that hopefully we have affordable living. We cannot have it cheap, but at least affordable. So, O'Brien, that is what Kenyans are saying on social media. And thank you so much back at home for making the time to be with us until this late. This is the Scorecard. We hope to see you again next week. My name is Marie Yambo. I hand it over to O'Brien Kimani to close.
Very good. Thank you so very much indeed, Marie Yambo, for taking us through the comment section on the scoreboard. You have been watching the Scorecard live from Broadcasting House. We do these every Tuesday from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Well, yeah, that's right. And the conversation today has been around EPRA's fuel pricing model. And we have been in the company of three gentlemen. Engineer Patrick Obath, the immediate former chair of the National Oil Corporation of Kenya. He has vast experience in the oil industry. He has been with us. Thank you very much indeed, Engineer, for joining us. And of course, economist and governance expert, Professor Fred Ogola. Asante sana for your time. And finally, Thuo Njoroge, who is an energy economist. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Stay right here. See you again on Tuesday. Have a good night.